Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into this really incredible ancient tale. It's got ambition, profound devotion, and building projects on just a colossal scale, defining an entire era. And this isn't just dusty history. It's more like a vibrant window right into the human heart, revealing these timeless truths about our priorities.
Colossal is definitely the word. I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking about not just one magnificent structure, but an entire complex of truly awe-inspiring architecture. Just try to imagine the immense wealth involved, the unparalleled craftsmanship, and the deep symbolic meaning woven into every single stone and beam.
It's really something.
It's an absolute marvel of the ancient world, truly.
And right there, within this marvel, we find this fascinating paradox, one we're really going to dig into today. Because while we stand in awe of the sheer architectural genius, the biblical text itself, 1 Kings chapter 7, it subtly hints at this surprising tension. So here's a king, Solomon, right? Known for his profound dedication, who builds God's house in just 7 years. Seems pretty quick for something so grand.
Relatively speaking, yes. 7 years is still a long time, but considering the scale.
Right. But then immediately after, he dedicates an even longer period, 13 years, to his own, opulent palace complex. That striking difference in time, it just jumps out at you, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. 13 versus 7. And it immediately raises some really profound questions about power, about faith, and maybe most importantly, those subtle, almost imperceptible shifts in human priorities over time.
Yeah.
This allocation of time, of resources, it's like a silent commentary, but incredibly powerful on, evolving values.
That tension, exactly. That contrast between the sacred and the secular. That's precisely what we're diving into today. Our mission for this deep dive into 1 Kings chapter 7 is pretty clear. We really want to unpack the key characters, the people, the places involved, and in doing that, try to grasp the truly immense scale of these constructions.
Yeah, the scale is mind-boggling.
We'll definitely take a moment to appreciate the intricate details, the craftsmanship, because it's stunning. But maybe more importantly, we'll delve into the profound allegorical and spiritual meanings embedded in this ancient narrative. We'll try to analyze the actions from spiritual, psychological, and social standpoints. And then, perhaps most compellingly, connect these ancient endeavors to our own modern lives and try to peer into those unseen spiritual interactions that were undoubtedly at play behind the scenes.
It's definitely an exploration that challenges our understanding of, ancient ambition, divine purpose, and some truly enduring spiritual lessons. There's always that unseen layer, isn't there, that gives the visible structures their real weight.
Indeed. So let's begin by setting the scene, really bringing this story to life. Who were the key figures? What were the crucial places? And what were the magnificent things that came out of this epic building era?
Right. To really get a handle on the scope of these projects, we need to know who was involved, the masterminds, the hands that built it all. And at the center, of course, is King Solomon.
Solomon, son of David, third king of Israel. He's depicted as the ultimate overseer, right? The visionary for all these monumental projects.
Yeah, he's the driving force.
What's really noteworthy about Solomon here, though, even amidst these incredible achievements for God, is that his actions subtly hint, maybe, at a growing focus on royal prestige, personal glory.
It's a valid reading. I mean, he was blessed with immense wisdom, incredible wealth, and power from God, yes. And he inherited this temple dream from his father, David.
Right, David wanted to build it but couldn't.
Exactly. And Solomon was uniquely positioned. He enjoyed this period of peace, prosperity, stability, which was absolutely crucial for undertaking tasks of this magnitude. You just can't build like this during wartime.
That background is so critical to understanding how such a massive undertaking was even possible. But like you said, Solomon wasn't working alone. The text introduces another pivotal figure, maybe sometimes unsung, Hiram of Tyre.
Yes, Hiram. And it's important to clarify, like you said earlier, this isn't King Hiram of Tyre. The monarch Solomon made treaties with for timber and things.
Okay, so a different Hiram.
A distinct individual, yes. A master bronze artisan. And his background is fascinating, really unique for the time. His mother was a widow from the Israelite tribe of Naphtali, and his father was a Tyrian bronze worker. So he has this mixed heritage, both Israelite and Phoenician.
Which is pretty significant in itself.
It is, actually. This mixed heritage kind of symbolizes international collaboration. But maybe on a deeper level, God's use of diverse people, diverse skills, for his purposes. The text describes Hiram as being filled with wisdom, understanding, and skill, specifically in bronze work. A real artist, it says, who could basically do anything with bronze.
Wow, so a true master.
Absolutely. His role was pivotal in creating those magnificent bronze furnishings for the temple. He exemplifies the effective use of God-given talents, even beyond national or tribal boundaries.
Okay, so we have Solomon the visionary, Hiram the master craftsman. Then there's a character who might seem a bit in the background, but her presence is profoundly significant. Pharaoh's daughter, Solomon's wife. Right. And for her, a separate, elaborate palace was built within the complex. Her inclusion here really underscores Solomon's strategic political alliances, doesn't it? Alliances that were crucial for securing that peace and prosperity for Israel in that era.
Definitely a strategic political move, absolutely essential in the ancient Near East. And if we look ahead in Solomon's story, her presence also subtly foreshadows potential spiritual compromises later in his reign.
How so?
Well, these foreign alliances, especially through marriage, often brought foreign religious practices into the court, sometimes into the nation. So even at this high point of his reign, building the temple, this detail kind of hints at future implications, future troubles.
That's a critical detail, often overlooked, I think. And finally, we can't forget the unnamed multitude.
Right, the actual workers.
Tens of thousands of Israelite and probably other workers, craftsmen, officials. Though individually unnamed, their sheer numbers represent the human backbone of these projects, a testament to the massive and likely conscripted workforce that turned the king's grand ambition into reality.
Indeed. It wasn't just Solomon drawing plans and Hiram casting bronze. It was immense human effort on a staggering scale. And the implied cost, while it's not detailed explicitly here, it suggests forced labor, heavy burdens. It hints at the human toll of such grand ambitions.
Side we don't often think about.
No, but these workers were fundamental. Their labor underpinned the whole thing. Their sheer numbers just speak volumes about the almost unimaginable scale we're dealing with here.
Absolutely. So with the key players introduced, let's now zoom out to the grand stage where Solomon's vision took shape. Let's explore the very geography he transformed. First, obviously, Jerusalem.
The heart of it all.
The capital city, the central hub where all these monumental buildings went up. Solomon's reign utterly transformed it, didn't it? Reshaping it from maybe a more tribal capital into this magnificent royal and religious center.
Yeah, David established it politically, but Solomon truly built it up architecturally, solidifying its national significance. It became this prominent seat of sacred worship, the temple, and royal power, the palace complex, existing side by side. A powerful statement in itself.
Then we have Lebanon. Distant, but absolutely crucial. This was where the prized, luxurious cedar timber came from, used so extensively in Solomon's palace complex. Most notably giving the Palace of the Forest of Lebanon its evocative name.
That name itself, Forest of Lebanon, just conjures up these images of grandeur, doesn't it? And vast quantities of wood. Cedar wasn't just any wood, it was a luxury item. It signified opulence, durability, and it also represented that strong alliance with the other Hiram, King Hiram of Tyre, the monarch who supplied it.
So it brought a touch of the exotic and magnificent right into the heart of Jerusalem.
Exactly.
And then there's Tyre itself, the Phoenician city, home to our master craftsman Hiram. This was a major maritime hub, renowned as a center for advanced metallurgical expertise.
A key ally for Israel. It really highlights Israel's reliance on international trade and specialized skills for projects of this magnitude. It makes you wonder, could they have achieved the intricate bronze work for the temple without Tyre's, unparalleled expertise?
It certainly would have been immeasurably harder, maybe impossible on that scale.
It underscores how interconnected the ancient world was and the invaluable nature of specialized knowledge. You couldn't just learn this stuff overnight.
And then there's a location, maybe less famous, but vitally important, the Plain of Jordan, specifically between Succoth and Zarethan.
Ah, yes, the industrial zone, you could call it. This was the crucial site where Hiram the craftsman set up his foundry, the Reason. The rich clay deposits in that area were uniquely ideal for creating the massive molds required for casting those immense bronze items like the pillars, Jachin and Boaz, and the huge molten sea.
So the very ground itself was part of the technology.
Precisely. I mean, just think about the logistics involved. hauling tons of bronze ore, building vast furnaces capable of melting it, and then pouring these huge, intricately designed pieces accurately. It was a massive logistical undertaking, a marvel, especially considering the scale.
And finally, Egypt is implicitly referenced through Solomon's marriage to Pharaoh's daughter. Just reminding us of Solomon's significant political connections and global reach. Israel under Solomon wasn't isolated. It was a major player forging alliances with regional superpowers, a different kind of power projection.
Absolutely. So we've met the architects, the craftsmen, seen where they got their materials. Now let's confront the breathtaking results of their ambition, the actual structures and objects that really defined this era.
And the list is staggering. For the temple furnishings alone, just try to picture this. A vast array of bronze and gold objects meticulously crafted for worship. What specifically stood out in its grandeur and purpose? You have the two massive bronze pillars, Jachin and Boaz, intended to stand right at the entrance.
Huge statements right there.
Then the colossal molten sea, that enormous bronze water tank. And 10 intricate bronze stands or carts with their basins.
And these weren't just decorative, remember. They were designed for washing sacrifices, so absolutely functional pieces, essential for the rituals, but at the same time, exquisite works of art in their own right.
Functional art, you could say.
Yeah. And then, moving inside, numerous exquisite pure gold items. The gold altar for incense, the gold table for the bread of the presence, 10 gleaming gold lampstands, plus all the smaller tool cups, tongs, snuffers, fire pans, everything crafted from pure gold.
Wow. The sheer amount of precious metal, the artistry involved, it's almost unbelievable. Each item had a profound, functional, and deeply sacred purpose within the temple's worship rituals. They weren't just decorations, they were essential tools for divine service.
Okay, so that's the temple. What about the palace complex?
Equally impressive in its own way, but designed primarily to showcase royal power. You had the House of the Forest of Lebanon, a truly immense hall, then the Hall of Pillars, the Hall of the Throne, which was also the Hall of Judgment, where Solomon presided, his courtroom essentially.
Right. Plus Solomon's own private living quarters and, as we mentioned, that distinct, separate palace built specifically for Pharaoh's daughter. And these weren't simple huts. They were all constructed from huge, costly blocks of stone and, again, that prized cedar wood, lavish.
And one last thing before we move on from the things. The dedicated treasure from David.
Yes, that's a really significant closing note in this section. Upon the temple's completion, Solomon honored his father's legacy. He gathered all the gifts King David had dedicated, silver, gold, other precious utensils, and stored them safely in the treasuries of the Lord's temple.
A really significant act.
It was, fulfilling David's vow, connecting the generations, showing continuity.
Okay, let's really dig into the scope now. We've laid out the players and the pieces. Now, the grand endeavor itself, Solomon's truly ambitious building projects. What was the essential background, the context that even allowed for something this huge to take shape? Why this scale?
Well, fundamentally, you have to remember, this was seen, first and foremost, as a direct fulfillment of God's covenant promise to David. God had told David his son would build a house for the Lord.
So it wasn't just Solomon's idea.
No, it carried divine weight. It was a sacred responsibility, a divine mandate passed down from his father, initiated by God himself. That's the primary theological driver.
And Solomon himself was uniquely positioned, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Blessed with that legendary wisdom, and his reign was marked by this extraordinary period of national wealth, peace, and stability. That confluence of factors is rare. You absolutely need that peace to even think about building something like this.
Absolutely. You can't be mobilizing armies and building temples simultaneously, not on this scale. This unique combination allowed for mobilizing vast resources and that massive workforce we talked about. Without that divinely granted peace and prosperity, these grand plans likely would have remained just dreams on parchment, you know?
We mentioned the alliances, which were crucial. That strong relationship with King Hiram of Tyre, the monarch, provided not just essential lumber, especially the cedar, but also vital manpower and, critically, the specialized technical expertise of craftsmen like Hiram the metalworker.
Right. Can't overstate that. Without that international cooperation and shared advanced skills, these projects would have been far, far more difficult, if not totally impossible, on this scale.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting and perhaps, well, complicated. Let's talk about building the king's domain. The palace complex.
Yeah.
The text tells us this entire complex took a staggering 13 years to complete.
13 years compared to 7 for the temple.
Yeah.
It leaps off the page, doesn't it?
It really does. 7 years for God's house, 13 for his own. It makes me wonder, were his priorities already shifting here, subtly hinting at leaning towards the secular, or could there be another interpretation? Maybe the palace was just vastly more complicated.
That's the core tension, and it's a great question. I mean, some might argue, perhaps reasonably, that the palace complex was simply a larger project, maybe more complex functionally with all its different halls and residences.
Multiple buildings versus one main one.
Right. However, the text itself, by placing these accounts back to back and stating the times so baldly, it subtly invites us to consider it as maybe a silent commentary on Solomon's heart, perhaps even a foreshadowing of future struggles. This allocation of time and resources, it reveals something profound about his values, and perhaps values that were, well, evolving during his reign. It wasn't just about square footage.
A compelling point.
Yeah.
Let's break down the individual buildings within this massive complex then. Each one tells a story of royal ambition. First, the Palace of the Forest of Lebanon. The name itself is so evocative, isn't it? Its dimensions were absolutely colossal. The text says 100 cubits long, 50 wide, 30 high. In modern terms, that's roughly 150 feet long, 75 feet wide, 45 feet high. Just try to picture that. Over half the length of an American football field and taller than a typical four-story building today. What kind of statement was Solomon making with something so immense?
It was a statement of unparalleled power and wealth, pure and simple. Its grandeur was defined by these rows of huge cedar pillars supporting the roof. The text mentions 4 rows of pillars and then beams laid on top. Later descriptions clarify this a bit, perhaps 3 rows of 15 pillars each, supporting cedar chambers above. It must have created this stunning visual effect, like walking into a majestic indoor forest of massive cedar trunks holding up the ceiling.
Incredible imagery, like the name suggests. And the design was meticulous too. 3 rows of windows framed, facing each other on the side walls, letting in light and air. Doorways also framed, arranged perhaps in sets of 3, facing each other, grand entrances for grand occasions.
And its purpose, multifunctional. Sources suggest it was likely a vast armory. Isaiah 22 mentions it later, holding 500 gold shields Solomon had made. It probably also served as the state treasury, holding Solomon's immense wealth and a grand reception hall for visiting dignitaries. It was unequivocally designed to showcase Solomon's opulence, his power, his wealth to anyone who entered. A true statement piece.
A bold declaration of power and security, built to impress everyone, definitely. Next, we have the Hall of Pillars, perhaps smaller, but still substantial. 50 cubits long, 30 wide, so maybe 75 feet by 45 feet.
Still a very impressive space. It featured a stately porch or vestibule at the front, covered by a canopy, all supported by more pillars. This hall likely served as a grand entrance, or maybe an impressive waiting area for those seeking an audience with the king. It set the stage, prepared you for the main event.
Which leads us to the Hall of the Throne, also called the Hall of Judgment.
Right. This was, you could say, the most sacred of the secular spaces, if that makes sense. The very place where Solomon sat to hear legal cases and dispense justice, reflecting his famous wisdom. It showcased his divinely granted wisdom and his crucial role as the ultimate governor and judge for the nation.
So function was key here.
Function, but also grandeur. The interior was apparently quite lavish, paneled entirely with cedar from floor to ceiling, or perhaps from floor to rafters.
Like the temple's inner rooms almost, with all that wood paneling.
Indeed, similar materials were used, emphasizing the space's importance. This wasn't just a functional courtroom, it was where divine wisdom was meant to be exercised, reinforcing Solomon's image as a just ruler appointed by God. The setting had to match the significance of the role.
So those were the more public or state buildings? What about his personal space?
Solomon's private living quarters were apparently situated in another court, behind the Hall of Judgment, and the text says they were built in the same manner, same workmanship. So opulent style, using huge, costly stones and that magnificent cedar. No expense spared there either for the king's residence.
And we can't forget the separate palace for Pharaoh's daughter, his Egyptian wife. A similarly grand living quarter, signifying her high status within the court, and again, underscoring those crucial political alliances cemented through marriage. It showed respect to Egypt, a major power.
It paints a picture of a very complex, very grand royal center, a nerve center for the kingdom. And the overall construction quality, the text emphasizes this, was top-notch. All these palace buildings used massive, costly blocks of stone, meticulously cut and trimmed to exact measurements on all sides, even the unseen foundations.
So not just rough-hewn blocks piled up, but truly precision work on an immense scale.
Absolutely. The text highlights enormous foundation stones, some 10 cubits, some 8 cubits long. That's an astonishing 15 feet. Others 12 feet long. Longer than a large car for a single foundation stone. It's staggering. It underscores the scale and the intended permanence, the solidity of the construction.
Built to last.
Exactly. And the walls also use precisely cut stones, often with cedar beams integrated. The text mentions a pattern for the great courtyard walls. A layer of cedar beams for every 3 layers of hewn stone, a style mirroring the inner courtyard of the temple.
So there was some architectural echo between the palace complex and the temple, even in the construction techniques, the materials.
Yes, in the quality, the attention to detail, and the sheer scale, it was extraordinary across the board. A consistent level of excellence, you might say.
Okay, let's shift focus now from the king's domain back to the truly sacred. Furnishing the house of God, the temple furnishings crafted by Hiram.
Yes, Hiram, the master craftsman, absolutely indispensable here. Solomon summoned him specifically for his unparalleled skill in bronze work. Described, remember, as filled with wisdom, understanding, and skill, a true artist who could do anything with bronze. Solomon recognized he needed the best.
And where did he do this highly specialized work? Not in Jerusalem itself, you said.
No, the casting was done down in the Jordan Valley, in the clay ground between Succoth and Zarethan. That area, with its special type of clay, was apparently perfect for making the huge, intricate molds needed for these massive bronze pieces. You couldn't just do this anywhere.
The foundry location, chosen for a specific reason. So what were the major bronze pieces Hiram crafted for the temple? Let's start with those pillars.
Right, the iconic bronze pillars, Jachin and Boaz. Monumental. Each one was an astonishing 18 cubits tall. That's about 27 feet. Imagine pillars, the height of a 3-story building. Their bronze gleaming in the sun. And they were thick, too. 12 cubits in circumference, roughly 18 feet around. Hollow, most scholars think, but still massive.
Wow. And their capitals, the tops, were incredibly ornate, right?
Yeah, unbelievably so. He crafted 2 molded bronze capitals, each 5 cubits tall. That's another 7.5 feet, just for the capital shaped like lily blossoms, perhaps opening upwards. Elegant yet powerful.
And the decoration?
Lavishly decorated, each capital featured intricate nets of checkerwork, wreaths of chainwork, and hundreds of pomegranates arranged in rows encircling the network. 2 rows of pomegranates on each capital, totaling 400 pomegranates for both pillars. It was a magnificent display of artistry and complex, interwoven detail.
And the names, Jachin and Boaz, sat right at the entrance porch of the temple.
Hugely significant. One pillar on the south side of the entrance, named Jachin, meaning something like he, God, will establish or he provides security. The other on the north side, named Boaz, meaning in him is strength or stability comes from him.
So not just names, but profound theological statements greeting everyone.
Absolutely. Profound declarations spoken in bronze to everyone entering God's presence. A constant physical reminder that the temple's existence, Israel's foundation, Israel's strength, it all came solely from God. They represented God's promise to establish and strengthen his people. Powerful stuff indeed. Not structural supports, but symbolic ones.
And beyond these monumental bronze pillars, what else did Hiram's unparalleled skill conjure from this metal for the temple's intricate rituals? The molten sea.
Next, yes, the molten sea. Or maybe just the sea. An enormous round bronze tank, 10 cubits from rim to rim, 15 feet across, 5 cubits deep, 7.5 feet. And about 30 cubits in circumference, roughly 45 feet around.
The capacity is what truly gets me. The text says 2,000 bath. How much is that?
Estimates vary, but a bath was maybe 5 or 6 gallons, so somewhere around 10,000 to 12,000 gallons of water. This isn't a basin. It's practically a small swimming pool, like you said. It makes me wonder, given the temple's focus on reverence and ritual, was this immense scale purely practical for priestly cleansing? Or did it also serve a purpose of pure awe, echoing the grandeur Solomon also sought for himself?
That's a great observation, and it likely served both. Practically, yes, a lot of water was needed for priestly ablutions. But symbolically, the sheer volume spoke of abundance, maybe God's abundant grace or cleansing power. It was a massive engineering feat just to cast it and contain that much water.
And its base was just as striking, wasn't it?
It rested on 12 bronze oxen, all facing outward. 3 north, 3 west, 3 south, 3 east, with their hindquarters inward supporting the immense weight. A very powerful image, oxen often symbolizing strength and service.
And the details on the sea itself. Just below the rim, 2 rows of decorative nogs, or gourds, encircled it, cast as one piece with the tank itself. Incredible skill. The walls were a handbreadth thick, about 3 inches solid bronze, and its rim flared out elegantly like the brim of a cup, shaped like a lily blossom, echoing the design of the pillar capitals.
Where was it placed?
at the southeast corner of the temple's inner court. And yes, primarily used by the priests for their ceremonial cleansing, symbolizing purification and readiness for divine service.
Okay, what else did Hiram create from bronze? There were carts or stands.
Then you have the 10 bronze water carts or stands and their basins. Hiram made 10 identical bronze carts, 4 cubits long, 4 wide, 3 high, maybe 6 feet long, 6 feet wide, 4.5 feet tall, all cast from the same mold, apparently. Impressive standardization, almost like an ancient assembly line.
And their construction.
Complex. Incredibly complex for the time. They had side panels set in frames, braced with crossbars. They rolled on 4 bronze wheels underneath, about 1.5 cubits or 2.25 feet in diameter, like chariot wheels. And get this, the axles, spokes, rims, hubs, all cast from bronze as one single unit with the cart. Incredibly strong and robust design.
Amazing craftsmanship. Were they decorated?
Richly. Both the panels and the frames had carved lions, oxen, and cherubim, plus reeds and perhaps palm trees engraved wherever space allowed. Pure artistry combined with engineering. Each corner had supporting posts, maybe shoulder-like supports for the basins, also adorned with wreaths below.
And the basins they held.
10 bronze basins, 1 for each cart. Each basin was 4 cubits across, about 6 feet, and held maybe 40 baths, so 200 to 240 gallons of water. The top of each cart had a circular frame or opening, a cubit and a half round, designed specifically for the basin to sit in securely, projecting upwards like a pedestal.
And where did these go within the temple complex? What was their purpose?
5 were arranged on the south side of the temple courtyard, 5 on the north. They were crucial for washing parts of the burnt offerings, symbolizing the thoroughness required in the sacrificial system. And they also provided extra water for the priests' ritual washing portable purification stations, essentially. Purification was absolutely central to the temple rituals.
So the sea for the priests, the basins on carts for the sacrifices.
Generally, yes. Beyond these major pieces, Hiram also made all the necessary smaller bronze utensils. Pots, shovels, basins, or bowls for sprinkling blood, all burnished bronze, essential for the daily temple rites. The text says the weight of the bronze was so great it wasn't even recorded.
Just unimaginable quantity, so that covers the bronze. Now, having explored the magnificent bronze, let's step into the inner sanctuary, where Solomon himself oversaw the creation of objects made from an even more precious metal.
Pure gold. Yes. After detailing Hiram's bronze work, the text shifts. Solomon personally oversaw the creation of exquisite, pure gold furnishings for the temple's interior, the holy place, and the most holy place. This unequivocally emphasized its sacredness and the divine presence. Gold was the metal of divinity, of ultimate value.
What kind of items were made of pure gold?
The imposing gold altar for incense, which stood before the most holy place. The magnificent gold table for the bread of the presence, where the 12 loaves were placed weekly. 10 pure gold lampstands. 5 on the south side, 5 on the north side, in front of the most holy place, providing light. Delicate gold flower decorations, the lamps themselves, the tongs for trimming wicks.
Everything associated with light and incense.
Cups, snuffers for the lamps, basins, dishes for incense, fire pans, truly everything associated with the inner rituals was pure gold. Even the hinges, or perhaps the sockets, for the doors leading into the most holy place and the main sanctuary hall, the holy place, were entirely made of gold.
Just dripping with gold.
It truly signified the temple's extreme holiness and the divine presence that was meant to dwell there. Bronze for the courtyard, gold for the house itself, a clear hierarchy of materials reflecting nearness to God's presence.
Absolutely. And as that final act we mentioned earlier, Solomon gathered all the dedicated gifts from his father David. Silver, gold, utensils, things David had set aside for the temple and stored them in the temple treasuries, fulfilling that legacy, tying it all together across generations. A monumental undertaking truly showcasing unparalleled skill, resources, and a generational commitment to God. Okay, this comparison, I think, is where the real tension of the chapter emerges, as we've touched on. We've looked at the temple furnishings and Solomon's palace complex in detail. Now let's put them side by side and really highlight the contrast, starting with that critical difference in time and resources.
Yeah, this is stark, and the text makes no effort to hide it. The temple, God's house, took 7 years to build, meticulously following, we assume, divine instructions, or at least a divinely inspired plan given to David, with its entire focus on God's glory and proper worship.
7 years. A substantial amount of time, a huge national effort. But then
you get the palace complex, Solomon's own dwelling, his administrative center, his symbol of power, and that took an extensive 13 years to complete.
13 years.
Yeah.
Nearly double the time dedicated to God's house. That difference really jumps out, doesn't it? Makes you wonder, again, were his priorities already shifting here, subtly hinting at a leaning towards the secular? Or could there be another interpretation? Was the palace just vastly more complicated?
And that remains the interpretive crux. Like I said, one could argue the palace was simply a larger, more complex project, multiple interconnected buildings with diverse functions versus primarily one main sanctuary structure for the temple. That's the practical argument.
Logistical view.
Right. However, the narrative placement, the bald statement of the number 7, then 13, it feels deliberate. It subtly invites us, I think, to consider it as a silent commentary on Solomon's heart, maybe on his shifting focus. Perhaps even a foreshadowing of the compromises to come later in his reign. This allocation of time and resources, it's hard not to see it reflecting something profound about his values, and maybe values that were evolving, leaning more towards earthly grandeur.
It's a subtle but potentially damning detail. Let's consider how that tension might have played out even in the purpose and symbolism. Sacred versus secular, side by side.
Well, the temple, the house of God, was singularly dedicated. Its purpose was crystal clear, the dwelling place for the name of the Lord, as Solomon himself says later. Its entire existence was for worship, sacrifice, atonement, prayer, and establishing that central national identity centered squarely on Yahweh.
And its symbolism.
Profound. It represented God's sovereignty, his absolute holiness, his covenant faithfulness, his very presence, his immanence among his people. Every detail we discussed, from the gold and the specific woods to the precise layout, the cleansing facilities, it all emphasized holiness, reverence, divine order, maybe even a kind of blueprint of God's perfection.
Okay, clear divine purpose, clear sacred symbolism. Now, the palace complex, the house of the king.
Served unequivocally earthly functions. Housing the king and his considerable household, obviously, the administration of the entire kingdom, dispensing justice from the hall of judgment, military defense and projecting power with that armory in the forest of Lebanon, securing those vital political alliances through things like the house for Pharaoh's daughter.
So the palace was essentially a physical manifestation of Solomon's own power, his wealth, his status, his role as ruler.
Exactly. It was a showpiece designed to showcase his success, his worldly ambitions, asserting his authority as king to his own people, and, importantly, to foreign powers. The Hall of Judgment, in particular, really highlighted his critical role as the earthly ruler, the one dispensing justice, mirroring perhaps God's justice, but on an earthly plane.
So two structures right next to each other, probably on the same Temple Mount complex built by the same king, using similar high-quality materials and craftsmanship, but serving fundamentally different masters and purposes, one divine, one earthly, creating a powerful narrative tension right there in the geography of Jerusalem.
And regarding materials, as you said, it's worth noting, both projects used the absolute finest available. Those costly, huge hewn stones, extensive cedar, bronze, gold, a shared commitment to high quality and permanence.
But there were distinctive emphases in how they were used, right? Especially inside, maybe reflecting their core purpose.
A distinct emphasis, yes. The temple interior, as we said, was lavishly adorned with pure gold, signifying divine glory, holiness, the preciousness of God's presence. Gold was reserved for the most holy spaces and items.
And the palace?
The palace complex emphasized the grandeur and strength of those vast cedar timbers, the sheer scale of the halls like the forest of Lebanon, and the meticulously cut stone. It reflected human opulence, earthly power, durability, royal might. Less pure gold used for general adornment, it seems. More emphasis on grand structure and impressive, costly wood and stone.
Which brings us back to that core question. Is this just architectural harmony, using the best for both God and king, or is it a subtle prioritization shift?
Well, the temple, built perhaps to precise, divinely inspired measurements, symbolized God's perfection, cosmic order, divine design, right? But the sheer scale and lavishness of the palace, and especially that greater time invested, you could interpret that as a subtle yet significant reflection of Solomon's changing values. Gradually, maybe unconsciously at first, prioritizing his own dwelling, his own symbol of power over the house dedicated solely to God.
Hinting at that potential for self-aggrandizement, maybe pride creeping in.
It's a recurring theme that many scholars and readers highlight when looking at Solomon's whole reign. The seeds might have been sown here, even amidst these incredible accomplishments for God. This tension between serving God and enjoying the blessings of God, perhaps to excess, is central to his story.
Okay, let's go deeper now. Beyond the history and the amazing architecture, 1 Kings 7 is just incredibly rich with deeper spiritual meanings. We'll be looking at allegory, where a story hints at a hidden truth, Metaphor where one thing stands for another, and particularly typology where ancient patterns like these buildings or furnishings foreshadow greater realities, especially in Jesus Christ and the life of the believer.
Yeah, these aren't just academic terms. They're like keys to unlocking timeless insights from the text.
Let's start with parallels to God's own character and attributes. How do these physical structures speak about God?
Yeah, this is where it gets really fascinating. Take those massive bronze pillars again, Sheen and Boaz, their names. He will establish, and in him is strength. These aren't just labels. They serve as incredibly powerful metaphors for God's sustaining power, his unwavering faithfulness, themes you see echoed throughout the Psalms, like Psalm 89, verse 4, about establishing David's line.
Standing right at the temple's entrance, impossible to miss.
Exactly. A constant towering reminder for all who entered that the temple's existence, its stability, indeed Israel's own foundation and strength, came solely from God. They physically represented God's promise to establish and strengthen his people, a powerful declaration in bronze.
And what's fascinating here is that the temple's meticulous order and beauty itself, the precise measurements, the intricate descriptions of the furnishings, that itself seems to reflect a divine order, a divine beauty. It points towards God's inherent perfection, maybe the structured elegance of his creation.
Like a microcosm of God's perfect design, you could say, reflecting the orderliness of the God who commissioned it. And the molten sea, remember how vast it was? Symbolically, that immense capacity can represent God's boundless provision, maybe his absolute sovereignty over the chaotic waters, echoing passages like Psalm 93.4, which speaks of the Lord on high being mightier than the mighty waves of the sea. It's a tangible representation of divine abundance, more than enough cleansing for every need.
It's compelling how these physical things become a language for divine truths, which leads us naturally to the typology of Jesus Christ, the temple itself. Where does that point?
Well, the temple becomes the ultimate type, right? This magnificent physical temple is understood by Christian interpreters, drawing on the New Testament as a powerful type, a foreshadowing of Jesus' body. John 2.19-2:1 makes that connection explicitly when Jesus says, "Destroy this temple and I will raise it again in 3 days." And John clarifies he was speaking about the temple of his body.
And the New Testament confirms believers, the church, are now the temple of the Holy Spirit, God's dwelling place.
Exactly. Ephesians 2, for example, talks about believers being built together into a holy temple in the Lord, a dwelling place for God by the Spirit. So the immense effort, the incredible resources poured into this ancient structure, they point forward to the immense value God places on his people, his ultimate living dwelling place, which is us, the church.
And those pillars, Jachin and Boaz, he will establish in him his strength. How do they point specifically to Christ?
They're seen as a powerful typology of Jesus Christ as the ultimate source of establishment and strength for every believer. Through him, we are firmly established in faith. That's Jachin. And we find enduring strength for all of life's challenges. That's Boaz. He is the true, unwavering foundation and the source of all spiritual power. Jachin and Boaz find their ultimate fulfillment in Christ.
And the molten sea, the basins, all that water for cleansing, seems pretty obvious, maybe.
A clear typology of baptism, yes, symbolizing entry into the community and washing away sin. But maybe more profoundly, it points to the ongoing cleansing, purifying work of Christ's blood shed for us. The sheer abundance of water provided foreshadows the comprehensive, complete cleansing offered through the gospel, available to all who believe enough water, enough grace for every spiritual need. It speaks of the sufficiency of Christ's sacrifice.
And the exquisite gold furnishings inside. Each one resonates with Christ's roles.
Absolutely. You can draw lines from each one. The gold altar of incense, where prayers ascended, prefigures Christ as our eternal intercessor, always living to make intercession for us, as Hebrews says. The gold table for the bread of the presence points directly to Christ as the bread of life, who sustains us spiritually. And the 10 gold lampstands signify Christ as the unfailing light of the world, guiding us through darkness. Every detail can be seen pointing towards him and his ministry.
It's amazing how layered it is, how much meaning is packed in. What about the distinct role of the Holy Spirit in all this? Can we see typology or allegory there too?
I think so. Beyond Christ's initial cleansing work, the molten sea and basins, representing constant purification, can also typify sanctification, that ongoing work of being made holy through the power of the Holy Spirit. Just as the priests needed continual ritual cleansing to serve in God's presence, believers today are purified and empowered by the Holy Spirit to serve God effectively and live holy lives.
And Hiram the craftsman, you mentioned his skill as being divinely given earlier. How does he fit in here?
His craftsmanship is a beautiful allegory, I think, for the Spirit's empowering work. Hiram, explicitly described as filled with wisdom, understanding, and skill by God, really echoes the descriptions of Bezalel and Oholiab, the craftsmen for the tabernacle back in Exodus, who were explicitly filled with the Spirit of God for their artistic work.
So Hiram, too, potentially spirit-filled for this specific task.
It strongly suggests it. It can be seen as an allegory for how the Holy Spirit sovereignly empowers individuals, even those from diverse backgrounds like Hiram, with his mixed Israelite Phoenician heritage, with unique gifts and talents specifically to build up and beautify God's house, which today refers to his people, the church. God uses all sorts of people.
So God uses anyone he gifts, regardless of their background. Even the gold lampstands, providing light, metaphorically, can represent the Holy Spirit's vital role in divine illumination, in actively guiding believers into truth, just as Jesus promised in John 16 that the Spirit would guide them into all truth.
Okay, so we see God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit reflected. What about reflections on humanity in this chapter? Our gifts, our priorities, what does it tell us about ourselves?
Well, first, the positive. The remarkable collaboration between Solomon's leadership and Hiram's incredible craftsmanship beautifully illustrates that God uses the common yet diverse gifts and talents of all sorts of people for his grand purposes. It's not just the famous king. It's the skilled artisan playing a crucial, indispensable role. God uses our skills for his glory. It validates human creativity in service to God.
Absolutely. However, and here's where it gets really interesting and maybe uncomfortable, the palace complex. While undeniably showcasing human capacity for amazing creativity, organization, and skill, it also subtly alludes to that ever-present human tendency towards pride, the temptation to seek personal glory over divine honor, to build our own kingdoms.
The 13 years versus 7 for the temple again. That shadow.
Exactly. The sheer opulence, the scale, and especially that extended construction time for the palace complex serves as a profound commentary on human values. It symbolizes our inherent tendency, maybe, to prioritize personal comfort, luxury, earthly power over spiritual devotion and God's glory. This tension between serving God wholeheartedly and serving self, even subtly, is a timeless human struggle vividly portrayed right here in Solomon's building choices. It's a warning embedded in the narrative.
Okay, let's really try to unpack the impact and implications of Chapter 7 now, looking at it from several crucial angles. Let's start with a spiritual analysis. Discerning the heart's true focus, both for Solomon and for Israel.
Right. This chapter, as we've seen, brilliantly highlights that inherent tension between genuine spiritual devotion and, well, worldly pride or maybe just ambition. Solomon's initial prioritizing of the temple certainly reflects dedication, that seems clear. Building God's house first was a significant act of faith and obedience to the promise made to David.
Fulfilling the mandate.
Yes. But the greater investment of time and resources in his own palace immediately raises those serious questions about his ultimate spiritual focus. Was it beginning to drift even then? Or was the magnetic pull of earthly power and prestige starting to outweigh the pull of divine service?
And this serves as a kind of timeless spiritual warning for us today, doesn't it? About where our own hearts, our time, our energy, our resources truly lie.
Absolutely. It's a mirror. At the same time, on a positive spiritual note, the grandeur and the rich symbolism of the temple furnishings themselves, those pillars, Jachin and Boaz, the massive sea, the gold inside, they served as constant, tangible spiritual reminders for the Israelites. Reminders of God's presence, his power, his holiness, his faithfulness to his covenant promises. They were like visual sermons etched in metal and stone, reinforcing spiritual truths daily just by being there.
And the washing.
And the extensive provisions for ceremonial washing, all that water in the sea and the basins, symbolized the perpetual need for purification in order to approach God's holy presence. That concept was absolutely central to worship and maintaining spiritual readiness. You couldn't just barge into God's presence. You had to be cleansed, prepared. It underlined God's holiness and human sinfulness.
Okay, let's shift to a mental and psychological analysis. Thinking about Solomon himself, his mindset, his ambition, and the potential psychological costs or benefits.
Well, on one hand, the meticulous planning required, the sophisticated logistics involved in sourcing materials and managing labor, the flawless execution needed for these incredible architectural feats, it unequivocally demonstrates Solomon's formidable mental capacity, his exceptional organizational skill, his unwavering vision to bring these complex projects to life. He was clearly brilliant, sharp, a master organizer.
So not just a king, but a master project manager, maybe the ancient world's most demanding CEO.
Precisely. And psychologically, the sheer scale and intricate detail of his building projects probably served as a profound source of immense pride for Solomon. And maybe a psychological reassurance of his power, his legitimacy, his authority. It's natural to feel pride in such monumental achievements, and they address deep human needs for beauty, security, and leaving a lasting legacy, achieving permanence.
But there's always a potential downside to that kind of pride, psychologically speaking.
Potentially, yes. The lavishness of his own palace, especially taking longer than the temple, could suggest a psychological shift towards self-glorification, maybe revealing a subtle yet significant internal struggle between his initial devotion to God and his escalating personal ambition. Perhaps, as you suggested, even bordering on an obsession with monumental achievement for its own sake, building bigger and better just because he could, the ego getting inflated.
And what about the impact on the general populace, psychologically for them? How did seeing all this affect them?
Well, you'd imagine these magnificent structures fostered a deep sense of national pride and awe among the people seeing the temple, the symbol of God's presence, and the palace, the symbol of their king's power and the kingdom's glory. It could potentially deepen their connection to God through the sheer splendor of his dwelling place and foster pride in their kingdom status.
But there's that flip side we mentioned.
Yes, the flip side is crucial. These grand projects almost certainly created a heavy psychological and physical burden. The implied forced labor, the corvée, the high taxes needed to fund it all, while maybe tolerated initially because of national pride and peace. This burden would eventually contribute to significant social unrest and resentment, leading directly to the division of the kingdom after Solomon's death. So a mixed psychological impact. Awe and pride mixed with growing strain and resentment.
Okay, let's look at it theologically now. What are the core theological messages embedded in 1 Kings 7? What is it teaching us about God and his ways?
Well, first and foremost, it powerfully reinforces God's enduring covenant faithfulness, specifically to David. It details the establishment of that central, magnificent place of worship in Jerusalem, fulfilling God's promise. The temple explicitly signifies God's immanence, his desire to dwell actively among his people. God with us, visibly manifest, at least through his name and later his glory, dwelling there.
And Hiram's role, the craftsman with mixed heritage, theologically significant.
That wonderfully underscores the theological idea that God can and does use individuals from all backgrounds, equipped with specific, diverse talents given by him to accomplish his divine purposes. It's a powerful message of God's inclusive design, his sovereignty over human boundaries. His plan isn't limited by human lineage or nationality. God's Spirit equips whom he wills.
And the Shechem and Boaz. Pure theology.
Powerful theological declarations right there at the door, affirming God's fundamental character as the one who establishes Jachin and strengthens Boaz. They provide this foundational framework for understanding God's active, unwavering role in Israel's life and sustenance. Theology, literally, written in bronze for all to see and reflect on.
Is there also a theological warning here, beyond the commentary on Solomon's heart?
I think so. That striking contrast between the temple and the palace serves as a profound theological warning against idolatry. And not just the obvious kind, bowing to statues, but the more subtle idolatry of placing personal achievement, worldly splendor, political expediency, or even advantageous alliances before God and his explicit commands. Prioritizing the creation or the creature over the creator. A warning that still resonates deeply today about where our ultimate trust and allegiance lie.
Finally, let's consider the social analysis. What does this chapter tell us about the society of Solomon's time, its structure, its economy, its tensions?
Well, it clearly portrays an era of unprecedented national wealth, organization, and highly skilled labor being available. These projects required extensive resources, timber, stone, bronze, gold, and a vast organized workforce, which indicates a remarkably well-structured, prosperous society, at least at the top. A golden age in many ways, materially speaking.
And the international connections were key socially, too.
Absolutely. The presence of specialized craftsmen like Hiram from Tyre, the timber trade with Lebanon, the marriage alliance with Egypt, it all points to thriving international cooperation and a robust economy built on strategic alliances and trade. Israel under Solomon was certainly a significant regional player, a hub.
And governance within the society.
The Hall of Judgment within the palace complex highlights the crucial importance of justice and formal governance as central functions of the king within the social structure. Building projects went hand in hand with consolidating rule and demonstrating effective leadership, including the administration of justice.
And the house for Pharaoh's daughter, socially significant beyond politics.
Immensely. It reflects the significant social stratification and the political maneuvering of the time. It clearly demonstrated how royal marriages were strategically used to cement international relations and secure peace, a common practice for kings that had major social implications for the court and potentially the nation. However, and this is crucial socially, we have to remember the cost.
The burden on the people.
Exactly. These grand projects, symbols of power and prestige, likely came via extensive forced labor and heavy taxation, disproportionately affecting the common Israelites, especially those from the northern tribes, perhaps. This created underlying social tensions and resentments that would later explode, contributing directly to the kingdom's division after Solomon's death, as detailed so clearly in 1 Kings 12 when the northern tribes complain about the heavy yoke.
So this chapter shows the peak of Solomon's power and glory, but simultaneously sows the seeds of future social strife and division.
Exactly. It's a complex picture of magnificent success built, in part, on foundations that would eventually crack under the social strain.
Okay, this is where it gets really personal, bringing this ancient story, these ancient buildings, into our world today. How do Solomon's endeavors, his choices, his priorities, echo in our contemporary lives and lifestyles? Let's start with that critical issue we keep circling back to, prioritization. Personal versus collective or spiritual endeavors.
It's such a direct parallel, isn't it? It almost feels too obvious, but it's powerful. Just as Solomon spent more years and arguably more personal focus on his palace than the temple, we often see modern individuals, and maybe even whole societies, prioritizing personal comforts, careers, entertainment, material wealth, our own metaphorical palaces.
Our houses, our cars, our portfolios, our hobbies, our social media image.
Our status symbols.
Precisely. Prioritizing those over, say, community welfare, genuine spiritual growth, family time, or altruistic causes, what might be considered building God's temple, metaphorically speaking, in our lives today. How we allocate our most precious resources, our time, our energy, our money, it really does reveal our deeply held values, doesn't it? What we really worship. It absolutely does. It prompts that challenging self-examination. Where are we truly investing our best energy, our prime time, our passion? Are we building our careers, our homes, our personal brands with more zeal and dedication than we're investing in our spiritual lives, our relationships, our communities, or serving a purpose higher than ourselves? A tough question for each of us to honestly answer.
What about architectural grandeur and symbolism in our time? Do we still build structures that make similar kinds of statements about power and values?
Oh, absolutely. Contemporary societies continue to construct magnificent buildings that are absolutely statements in themselves. Think about towering corporate skyscrapers, symbols of economic might and corporate identity, colossal sports stadiums, often publicly funded, centers of entertainment and civic pride. Sprawling luxury residences showcasing extreme wealth, even grand government buildings.
They're all statements, just like Solomon's buildings were statements about him and his kingdom.
Exactly. They symbolize power, wealth, prevailing cultural values, what we deem important enough to invest in on a massive scale. A city's gleaming new tech campus or a nation's imposing new parliament building, often combining advanced technology with maybe some nods to tradition or sustainability, showcases modern grandeur and civic pride, mirroring that same human impulse we see in 1 Kings 7. They're built to inspire awe, project power, and reflect the values of their builders, whether corporate, civic, or personal.
And the timeless need for specialized skills, like Hiram's bronze work, is that still relevant?
That's timeless, absolutely. The reliance on highly skilled craftsmen like Hiram is mirrored today by the demand for specialized engineers, visionary architects, programmers, data scientists, medical specialists, master artisans in any complex field. Think about cutting-edge projects like building sustainable energy infrastructure, developing complex AI, or pioneering new medical treatments. They require incredibly specialized knowledge and skill, similar in principle to Hiram's unique expertise in large-scale bronze casting. High-level skills are always needed for ambitious projects. No matter the era, craftsmanship still matters.
And the Hall of Judgment Solomon dispensing justice in a dedicated space, does that resonate today?
Finds its parallels everywhere, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. In modern judicial systems, in the imposing government buildings dedicated to law and order courthouses, parliaments, supreme courts around the world, the very concept of having a designated, respected space specifically for fair judgment underscores that enduring, universal need for ethical governance, due process, and justice in any functioning society, ancient or modern. It's foundational.
What about that tension between materialism and spirituality? How does that play out today, comparing Solomon's temple to our lives?
Well, the vivid description of Solomon's lavish gold and bronze furnishings Beautiful, yes, impressive, absolutely, but ultimately external. It contrasts so sharply with the New Testament teaching that believers themselves are now the temple of the Holy Spirit. The focus shifts entirely inward, from physical place to living person.
Profoundly. It moves from an ornate external physical structure to the internal spiritual dwelling of God within the individual believer and within the community of believers, the church. This really challenges our modern, often consumerist obsession with external grandeur, material possessions, and outward appearances. It forces us to ask, where does God truly desire to dwell today, and are we cultivating that dwelling place within ourselves and our communities through qualities like love, justice, mercy, and holiness, rather than just focusing on outward structures or possessions?
And Hiram's example, using his God-given talent for God's purposes, how does that apply to us?
A powerful model for us today, I think. Our careers, our skills, our creative endeavors, whatever they are, plumbing, coding, teaching, parenting, art, they can be seen as forms of worship when dedicated to glorifying God and serving a higher purpose, serving others, rather than solely for personal gain or recognition. It elevates our daily work into something potentially sacred, a vocation, using our gifts for more than just ourselves, contributing to the common good, building up the community.
And finally, maybe a cautionary echo regarding family priorities, thinking about that palace for Pharaoh's daughter, tied to that foreign political marriage. What's the modern parallel there? How might that warn us?
It can serve as a warning, perhaps, against alliances or pursuits, whether in relationships, business, or lifestyle choices, that, however beneficial or advantageous they might seem on the surface, maybe socially, financially, politically, may subtly compromise our core faith, our values, our spiritual fidelity over time.
The slow drift.
Exactly. Today, families, individuals, we have to consciously guard against cultural pressures or lifestyle influences that might inadvertently draw us away from spiritual devotion or ethical integrity. It's a reminder that even seemingly good or necessary choices can have unseen spiritual costs or consequences down the line if we're not careful, if we don't maintain clear boundaries and priorities rooted in faith. It's about vigilance in all areas of life.
Now, having meticulously examined these visible structures, the palace and the temple furnishings, and their earthly purposes, their symbolism, let's pull back that final curtain. Let's talk about the unseen. What unseen spiritual forces, divine intentions, or even conflicts were truly at play behind this incredible tapestry of ambition, devotion, and maybe emerging compromise?
Right, because the biblical narrative always assumes this unseen spiritual reality is primary. First off, Solomon's very ability to undertake such massive projects. It wasn't just human capacity, was it? The text presents it as a direct fulfillment of God's specific promise to David, and a profound, tangible sign of divine blessing on Solomon's reign, at least initially. The peace, the wealth, the resources, the availability of skilled labor like Hiram, you can really see it all as God's supernatural provision, specifically given for the purpose of building his house.
So it wasn't just human ingenuity or good fortune. It suggests divine enablement, God actively orchestrating circumstances and people for his purpose.
That's certainly how the narrative frames it, God empowering the work. And connected to that, Hiram's skill. You mentioned the spirit earlier, right?
Yes, that parallel with Bislow.
While human hands did the crafting, Hiram's skill is described using language very similar to Bezal's endowment in Exodus, being filled with divine wisdom and skill. That strongly suggests the Holy Spirit's unseen influence actively guiding his work, giving him the genius and ability for these unique tasks. It points to God actively equipping individuals, even those from diverse backgrounds, sometimes outside the main covenant community, to fulfill his specific purposes. God's resources aren't limited to Israel alone.
But if God was so involved, so empowering this whole endeavor, what about that contrast? The palace taking significantly longer than the temple. How do we understand that spiritual dynamic?
That's the tough question, isn't it? From a spiritual perspective, you could interpret Solomon's greater investment of time and resources in his own palace as perhaps a subtle spiritual test that maybe he was beginning to fail. Or maybe more pointedly, as a poignant warning sign flashed by the narrative itself, hinting at his future spiritual deviations, the seeds of compromise being sown even during this glorious period.
So it suggests God is watching not just the outward actions, the building itself, but the heart's intentions, the allocation of priorities.
Absolutely. This behind-the-scenes spiritual dynamic implies that God observes not only our outward actions, but more importantly, the deepest intentions and priorities of our hearts. Is our primary focus His glory or our own? It hints at a subtle spiritual battle going on for Solomon's focus, a gradual pull away from complete single-minded devotion. It really does seem to foreshadow his later, more explicit compromises with idolatry, driven partly by his foreign wives. It highlights that God is always assessing our internal landscape, the direction our heart is leaning, not just our external accomplishments.
And the symbolism we discussed earlier, the pillars, Shechem and Boaz, the molten sea, they weren't just symbolic for humans, were they? Did they have spiritual weight in the unseen realm?
Immensely so, I would argue. They weren't mere architectural features or decorations for human appreciation alone. They carried profound spiritual weight. They were intended to constantly remind the people and their leaders of God's unchanging character, his power, his faithfulness, and their absolute reliance on him for establishment, Shechem, and strength, Boaz. So, in the unseen realm, they stood as declarations against chaos, as statements of divine order and reliability, like a constant unspoken dialogue embedded right there in the temple's architecture, communicating truth visually and spatially, perhaps even pushing back against negative spiritual forces.
And the ultimate goal of all this building, all this craftsmanship detailed in chapter 7.
Well, although it's fully described in the next chapter, 1 Kings 8, the ultimate culmination of all the incredible physical work detailed here in chapter 7, the real payoff, is that eventual unseen filling of the temple with God's glorious presence, the Shekinah glory.
God moving in, the dedication ceremony.
Exactly, that invisible spiritual event, the descent of the glory cloud, signifying God's acceptance and his literal indwelling. That was what ultimately validated all the immense physical efforts, all the bronze and gold. That was the true goal. Not just the finished building itself, however magnificent, but God's tangible inhabitation of it.
So the building was the means, God's presence was the end.
Precisely. The temple, in this sense, establishes God's throne visibly on earth, actively opposing spiritual chaos, challenging any other claims to dominion in that space. It sets a spiritual marker in the world, declaring Yahweh's rightful reign and presence among his people. The physical points to the spiritual reality.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into 1 Kings 7, wow, what a journey. We've navigated this staggering display of ancient architecture, really tried to grasp the unparalleled craftsmanship, outlined the key characters, marveled at the truly immense scale of Solomon's palace complex, and explored the intricate symbolic details of the temple's awe-inspiring furnishings.
Truly breathtaking stuff. But as we've seen, it's so much more than just a historical blueprint or an architectural record, isn't it? This chapter unfolds as this profound, almost subtle narrative of contrasting priorities. That stark 7-year dedication to God's house set right against a 13-year investment in the king's own glory and administration.
That contrast is just inescapable, hangs over the whole chapter. And the allegorical, the typological, the spiritual meanings embedded here, they run incredibly deep. They offer these timeless insights into leadership, into the powerful allure of human ambition and pride, the nature of divine purpose, and those subtle, often unseen spiritual battles that are constantly being waged for our hearts, for our allegiance. It really challenges us directly, doesn't it, to reflect on our own building projects. Where do you, listening right now, truly invest your best time, your prime energy, your most valuable resources?
Yeah, are you constructing your own palaces, your careers, your reputations, your comforts, your online persona, maybe with more zeal and passion than you are building up your spiritual life, serving God's purposes in the world around you, or investing in the things that have genuine eternal value, like relationships and acts of kindness? This deep dive really reveals, I think, that true lasting success in God's eyes isn't just about what we manage to construct outwardly, however impressive it might look. It's much more about why we build it and ultimately for whom we build it.
Exactly. What's the foundation? Who gets the glory?
Yeah.
So here's a final thought to ponder as we close. In a world that is often, maybe increasingly, obsessed with outward grandeur, with material possessions, with visible achievements and quantifiable success, what unseen spiritual structures are you reinforcing or perhaps neglecting with your daily choices, with your deepest intentions, with the seemingly small priorities you set?
And when the invisible finally becomes visible, as the Bible says it one day will for all of us, will your life reflect a temple dedicated wholeheartedly to divine glory and serving others? Or will it look more like a palace, primarily serving personal ambition, worldly comfort, and self-interest?
Something profound to think about as you navigate your own grand designs.